The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Elena Vasquez adjusted her rifle scope for the 100th time that week. At 23 years old, she had already spent 2 years fighting to prove herself in a world that believed women belonged anywhere but on the battlefield. Her calloused hands moved with practiced precision, checking every component of her weapon while the other soldiers prepared for another day of what they called real training. Elena had grown up in a small farming town where her father taught her to hunt rabbits and deer to feed the family. Her natural talent with a rifle became apparent when she could consistently hit targets at distances that impressed even the local sheriff. When the war broke out and recruitment officers came through town, Elena saw her chance to serve her country in a way that mattered. What she hadn't expected was the wall of resistance she would face from her own military commanders. General Marcus Thompson was a career military man with 30 years of combat experience under his belt. He had earned his reputation through countless successful missions and had the respect of every soldier under his command. Thompson believed in tradition, discipline, and proven methods. In his mind, women in combat roles were a dangerous experiment that could cost lives when the stakes were highest. He had fought tooth and nail against the new policies that allowed women in frontline positions. The tension between Elena and General Thompson had been building for months. Every morning during training exercises, she could feel his disapproving gaze following her movements. When she excelled in marksmanship drills, he would find fault with her equipment maintenance. When she demonstrated tactical knowledge, he questioned her physical stamina. No matter how well Elena performed, the general seemed determined to prove that she didn't belong in his unit. The other soldiers in Elena's squad were divided in their opinions. Some, like Sergeant Jake Morrison, had seen her skills firsthand and respected her abilities. Morrison was a veteran sniper who had initially been skeptical about training a woman, but Elena's consistent performance had won him over. He often found himself defending her to other soldiers who shared the general's doubts. However, not everyone was convinced. Corporal David Hayes and several others believed that Elena's presence in their unit was a distraction that could prove fatal in real combat situations. They argued that the physical demands of warfare, combined with the psychological pressure of life-or-death decisions, required a different kind of toughness that they believed women simply couldn't possess. The debate came to a head during a particularly challenging training exercise designed to simulate enemy infiltration. Elena's squad was tasked with securing a mock village while under simulated attack. As the exercise began, Elena took position on a rooftop overlooking the main street, her rifle trained on potential entry points. The scenario called for precise shooting to neutralize threats without hitting civilian targets represented by cardboard cutouts scattered throughout the area. As the simulation unfolded, enemy forces began their assault on the village. Elena tracked multiple targets through her scope, calling out positions to her squad mates below. When the first wave of attackers appeared, she began taking calculated shots, each one finding its mark with deadly accuracy. Her breathing remained steady, her hands firm, as she systematically eliminated threats that could have overwhelmed the ground forces. General Thompson watched the exercise from the command post, his jaw clenched as he observed Elena's performance. Every successful shot seemed to contradict his fundamental beliefs about women in combat. He found himself looking for mistakes, for any sign that would justify his position. When Elena successfully neutralized 6 targets in rapid succession while under simulated counterfire, the general's frustration became visible to the other officers present. The exercise concluded with Elena's squad successfully defending the village with minimal casualties. Her shooting had been instrumental in preventing the enemy from gaining key positions. As the soldiers gathered for debriefing, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. The general's criticism of Elena's performance seemed forced and petty compared to the obvious success of the mission. That evening, Elena sat alone in the barracks, cleaning her rifle and reflecting on the day's events. She had proven herself once again, but she knew that General Thompson would never truly accept her as long as her abilities remained theoretical. The upcoming deployment to an active combat zone would provide the ultimate test, but Elena wondered if she would even get the chance to prove herself where it truly mattered. Sergeant Morrison approached her workstation, noticing the thoughtful expression on her face. You did good today, Vasquez, he said quietly. Better than good, actually. That shooting was some of the finest I've seen in 20 years of service. Elena looked up from her weapon, managing a small smile. Thanks, Sergeant. But we both know it doesn't matter how well I perform in training. The general has made up his mind about me. Morrison nodded grimly. Thompson's old school, no doubt about it. But he's also a soldier who understands what wins battles. When push comes to shove, he'll recognize talent when he sees it. You just have to be patient and keep doing what you're doing. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Corporal Hayes and 2 other soldiers. Hayes had been drinking, and his voice carried an edge of confrontation that immediately put Elena on guard. Well, if it isn't our resident sharpshooter, he said with mock admiration. Heard you had quite the performance today. Too bad it was just pretend. Elena continued cleaning her rifle, refusing to take the bait. She had learned early in her military career that responding to provocation only gave her critics more ammunition to use against her. Morrison stepped forward, but Elena raised a hand slightly, indicating she could handle the situation herself. Training prepares us for the real thing, Hayes, she said calmly. Every shot I take in practice makes me better when lives are on the line. Hayes laughed harshly. Lives on the line. That's rich. You think when bullets start flying for real, you'll have the stomach for it? War isn't a hunting trip, sweetheart. It's about killing or being killed, and that takes a kind of hardness that you just don't have. The barracks fell silent as other soldiers became aware of the confrontation. Elena set down her cleaning cloth and looked directly at Hayes. Her voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath her words. I guess we'll find out soon enough, won't we? I notice you talk a lot about hardness and killing, but your scores on the range suggest your shooting could use some work. The observation hit home, and Hayes' face flushed with anger. Before he could respond, Morrison stepped between them. That's enough, Corporal. Elena's earned her place here same as everyone else. If you've got a problem with military policy, take it up with command. Hayes glared at both of them before turning away with his companions. As they left, Elena could hear him muttering about political correctness and dangerous experiments. She returned to her rifle maintenance. But the encounter had left her feeling more isolated than ever. The next morning brought news that Elena's unit would be deploying to a contested region where enemy forces had been conducting raids against supply convoys. Intelligence reports suggested that the enemy was using sniper teams to target convoy leaders and disable vehicles. The mission would require counter-sniper operations in challenging terrain with limited visibility and multiple potential threat vectors. General Thompson called a briefing to discuss the deployment. As the soldiers gathered in the command tent, Elena could sense the change in atmosphere. The joking and casual conversation that characterized training exercises was replaced by the serious focus that came with real missions. Lives would be at stake, and everyone knew it. Intelligence indicates that enemy forces have established sniper nests along the convoy route. The general began, pointing to a map of the operational area. Their tactics involve targeting lead vehicles to disable entire convoys, then moving to secondary positions before our forces can respond. We'll be conducting counter-sniper operations to clear these positions and secure safe passage for supply runs. Elena studied the terrain features on the map, noting the elevation changes and potential hiding spots that would appeal to enemy snipers. The area was mountainous with dense vegetation, providing numerous concealment opportunities. It would be challenging work that required patience, skill, and nerves of steel. The general continued his briefing, outlining the specific roles each team would play in the operation. When he reached Elena's assignment, his tone became noticeably more clipped. Vasquez will be assigned to observation duties with Bravo Team. You'll maintain overwatch while the primary sniper teams engage targets. Elena felt a flash of frustration, but kept her expression neutral. Being assigned to observation was essentially being benched during the most critical part of the mission. It was a clear indication that the general still didn't trust her abilities when lives were truly on the line. Sergeant Morrison spoke up from across the tent. Sir, with respect, Vasquez has consistently outperformed most of our designated snipers in training exercises. Wouldn't her skills be better utilized in a primary role? The general's eyes narrowed as he looked at Morrison. Sergeant, Training exercises don't account for the psychological pressure of actual combat. I won't risk the success of this mission on unproven personnel, regardless of their training scores." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Elena understood that she was the unproven personnel he referred to, despite months of superior performance in every training scenario they had thrown at her. The general's decision wasn't based on her abilities. It was based on his prejudices about women in combat. As the briefing concluded and soldiers began preparing for deployment, Elena found herself questioning whether she would ever get the chance to prove herself in the eyes of her commanding officer. She had joined the military to serve her country and make a difference, but it seemed that her gender would always be a barrier to acceptance. The deployment was scheduled for dawn the following day. Elena spent the evening checking and rechecking her equipment, knowing that even in an observation role, she needed to be prepared for anything. War had a way of changing plans quickly, and she intended to be ready regardless of what the general had assigned her to do. As she lay in her bunk that night, Elena thought about the conversation she'd had with her father before leaving home. He had expressed concerns about her joining the military, not because he doubted her abilities, but because he knew the challenges she would face as a woman in a male-dominated field. "You'll have to be twice as good to get half the recognition," he had told her. "But if anyone can do it, you can." Tomorrow would begin the test of whether her father's confidence had been justified. Elena closed her eyes and tried to rest, knowing that the coming days would determine not just her future in the military, but potentially the future of other women who dreamed of serving their country in combat roles. The weight of that responsibility was both inspiring and terrifying. Elena had never asked to be a pioneer or a symbol of women's capabilities. She had simply wanted to serve her country and use her skills to protect the people she cared about. But circumstances had thrust her into a position where her performance would be scrutinized and judged not just on its own merits, but as evidence for or against the larger question of women in combat. As sleep finally came, Elena's dreams were filled with images of mountain peaks and rifle scopes, of proving grounds and distant targets. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she intended to meet them with the same determination that had brought her this far. Whether the general believed in her or not, Elena believed in herself, and sometimes that had to be enough. The convoy moved through the mountain pass like a steel serpent winding its way through dangerous territory. Elena gripped her rifle tighter as their vehicle bounced over the rough terrain, her eyes scanning the ridgelines for any sign of enemy movement. 3 days into the deployment, they had already encountered 2 failed ambush attempts, but intelligence suggested that the enemy was adapting their tactics and preparing something more sophisticated. General Thompson rode in the lead vehicle, maintaining radio contact with all units as they navigated the treacherous route. The convoy consisted of 12 vehicles carrying critical supplies to forward operating bases deeper in the contested territory. Each truck was loaded with ammunition, medical supplies, and equipment that could mean the difference between life and death for soldiers already engaged with enemy forces. Elena's assignment to Bravo Team had placed her with Sergeant Morrison and 3 other soldiers responsible for providing overwatch during convoy stops. While the primary sniper teams took positions on the high ground, Bravo Team was tasked with monitoring secondary approaches and maintaining communication links. It was important work, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that her skills were being wasted while other soldiers took on the more challenging assignments. The terrain grew increasingly difficult as they climbed higher into the mountains. Narrow switchbacks forced the convoy to slow to a crawl, while dense forests on either side provided countless hiding spots for potential attackers. Intelligence reports had identified this particular stretch of road as a favorite location for enemy ambushes, which explained the tension visible in every soldier's posture. Morrison's voice crackled through Elena's radio headset. "Vasquez, you see anything on the eastern slope? Something's not sitting right with me about those tree lines." Elena adjusted her scope and swept the indicated area methodically. The morning mist was beginning to lift, but visibility remained limited. She studied the shadows between the trees, looking for anything that seemed out of place. After several minutes of careful observation, she keyed her radio. "Negative on obvious threats, but there's a lot of dead space in those woods. If someone wanted to set up an ambush, they couldn't ask for better terrain. The convoy continued its slow progress through the pass, but Elena noticed that General Thompson had ordered increased spacing between vehicles. The change in formation suggested that command was expecting trouble, even if they hadn't identified specific threats yet. The radio chatter between units became more frequent as drivers reported mechanical issues and navigational challenges. As they rounded a particularly sharp curve, the lead vehicle suddenly came to a halt. Elena could see soldiers dismounting and taking defensive positions, but the reason for the stop wasn't immediately clear. Morrison's team quickly moved to their assigned overwatch position, a small rocky outcrop that provided good visibility of the surrounding area. Through her scope, Elena could see that a large tree had fallen across the road, blocking the convoy's path. The obstacle appeared natural, but the timing was suspicious given the intelligence reports about enemy activity in the area. As she watched, she noticed movement in the forest approximately 800 meters from the convoy's position. "Morrison, I've got movement in Sector 7, roughly 800 meters out," Elena reported through her radio. "Can't get a clear visual, but something's definitely moving through those trees." Before Morrison could respond, the distinctive crack of a sniper rifle echoed through the valley. Elena saw one of the soldiers near the fallen tree spin and fall, clutching his shoulder. The enemy had opened fire from a concealed position, and the convoy was trapped in a deadly kill zone. "Contact! Sniper fire from the northwest." Morrison shouted into his radio. "All units take cover and return fire." Elena immediately began scanning for the source of the shot, her training taking over as adrenaline flooded her system. The enemy sniper had the advantage of position and preparation, but she had spent months studying ballistics and trajectory calculations. Based on the angle of impact and the sound signature, she estimated the shooter's position to be somewhere along the ridge line above them. General Thompson's voice came through the radio with calm authority despite the chaos erupting around the convoy. "Primary sniper teams, locate and eliminate the threat. All other units provide suppressing fire and prepare for additional contact." The primary sniper teams began moving toward elevated positions that would give them better angles on the suspected enemy location. Elena watched through her scope as they carefully advanced, but the thick forest cover made it difficult to spot the enemy shooter. Meanwhile, more shots rang out from different positions, confirming that they were facing multiple enemy snipers working in coordination. Elena keyed her radio again. "Morrison, I've got a potential target at approximately 900 meters, bearing northwest. Possible muzzle flash in those rock formations above the tree line." Morrison glanced at her position and nodded. "Good eye, Vasquez." Passed that information to the primary teams. But, as Elena watched, she realized that the primary sniper teams were moving toward positions that wouldn't give them clear shots at the location she had identified. The enemy had chosen their positions carefully, using natural terrain features to limit the angles from which they could be effectively engaged. The convoy was taking increasingly accurate fire, and several more soldiers had been wounded. "Morrison, the primary teams are moving to the wrong positions," Elena said urgently. "From where they're headed, they won't have clear shots. The enemy snipers are using those rock formations as natural shields." Morrison looked through his own binoculars, confirming Elena's assessment. "You're right, but they're already committed to those positions. It would take too long to redirect them." Elena studied the tactical situation developing before them. The convoy was pinned down by accurate sniper fire. The primary teams were moving toward ineffective positions, and wounded soldiers were exposed to continued attack. Standard procedure called for her to maintain overwatch and relay information, but standard procedure wasn't working. "Sergeant, I can take that shot," Elena said quietly. "From this position, I have a clear angle on the primary threat." Morrison looked at her with a mixture of concern and respect. "Vasquez, that's nearly 1,000-meter shot in mountain conditions with variable wind. Even for someone with your skills, it's pushing the limits of what's possible." Elena checked her rifle one final time, adjusting her scope for distance and elevation. "Sergeant, with respect, people are getting hurt down there. I can make this shot." Before Morrison could respond, General Thompson's voice came through the radio again. "Primary teams, what's your status?" We need that sniper eliminated immediately. The response was not encouraging. Sir, we're having difficulty acquiring the target. Terrain is blocking our sight lines, and we're taking accurate counterfire. Elena looked at Morrison, her eyes conveying both determination and urgency. The sergeant studied her face for a moment, then made a decision that would change both their careers. General Thompson, this is Morrison. I have a shooter with a clear angle on the primary threat, requesting permission to engage. There was a pause before the general responded. Morrison, are you telling me one of your observation team has a better position than our primary snipers? Morrison glanced at Elena, who was already settling into her shooting position. Sir, affirmative. My shooter has been tracking the target and has a clear shot. Another pause. Elena could almost hear the general's internal debate through the radio silence. Finally, his voice came back with reluctant authorization. Very well, Morrison. Take the shot, but make it count. We can't afford to give away our position for a miss. Elena controlled her breathing and settled into her shooting stance. Through her scope, she could see the rocky outcrop where the enemy sniper had taken position. The target was partially concealed, but she had identified the specific location based on muzzle flashes and the geometry of the shots he had fired at the convoy. The mathematics of long-range shooting filled her mind as she calculated windage, bullet drop, and atmospheric conditions. At this distance, a small error in any variable could result in a complete miss. The wind was gusting unpredictably through the mountain pass, and the elevation difference added another layer of complexity to the shot. Elena's world narrowed to the view through her scope. The sounds of battle around her faded into background noise as she focused entirely on the target area. She had trained for moments like this thousands of times, but training could never fully replicate the pressure of knowing that lives depended on her accuracy. She could see movement in the target area as the enemy sniper shifted position slightly. The motion gave her a better view of her target, but it also meant she had to adjust her aim point quickly. Elena smoothly tracked the movement, leading the target based on his apparent direction of travel. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger as she made final adjustments to her aim. Everything Elena had learned about shooting, every hour of practice, every correction from instructors, came together in this single moment. She could feel her heartbeat and timed her shot to fall between beats when her body was most stable. The rifle bucked against her shoulder as the shot fired, and Elena immediately began cycling the bolt to chamber another round while maintaining her sight picture. Through her scope, she watched the bullet's path toward the target, calculating its trajectory based on the environmental conditions she had observed. For what seemed like an eternity, Elena tracked the bullet's flight toward the distant enemy position. The shot had felt good when she fired it, with clean trigger control and proper follow-through, but external factors could still cause a miss at this extreme range. Wind gusts, atmospheric pressure changes, or slight errors in distance estimation could all affect the bullet's path. Then, she saw the impact. The enemy sniper's position erupted in a small cloud of dust and debris as her bullet struck home. The hostile fire that had been raking the convoy suddenly ceased from that direction, and Elena could see through her scope that the threat had been neutralized. Target down. Elena reported calmly into her radio, though her heart was racing with adrenaline. Enemy sniper eliminated. Morrison looked at her with undisguised admiration. Outstanding shot, Vasquez. That was some of the finest shooting I've ever witnessed. General Thompson's voice came through the radio moments later. Morrison confirmed target elimination. Confirmed, sir. Target neutralized by Vasquez. Hostile fire from that position has ceased. There was a longer pause this time before the general responded. When he did, his tone carried a note that Elena had never heard before. Outstanding work, Morrison's team. Primary sniper teams, continue advancing to clear remaining threats. The firefight continued for another 20 minutes as the remaining enemy snipers were located and eliminated by the primary teams. Elena continued providing overwatch and intelligence to the other units, but the immediate crisis had passed with the elimination of the primary threat. The convoy was able to clear the fallen tree and continue its mission with minimal delays. As they prepared to move out, Elena noticed that several soldiers who had previously been skeptical about her presence were now looking at her with something approaching respect. Word of her 1,000-meter shot had spread quickly through the unit, and the fact that she had performed under pressure when lives were at stake had changed many minds about her capabilities. Corporal Hayes, who had been one of her harshest critics, approached her as she was securing her rifle. "Vasquez," he said awkwardly. That was a hell of a shot. I owe you an apology for some of the things I said." Elena nodded acknowledgement, but didn't elaborate on his past behavior. "We all want the same thing, Hayes. To complete the mission and get everyone home safely." The convoy resumed its journey through the mountain pass, but the atmosphere had changed. Elena could sense a shift in how the other soldiers related to her. She was no longer the untested woman who might crack under pressure. She was the soldier who had made the shot when it mattered most. General Thompson maintained radio silence regarding Elena specifically, but his tactical decisions began including her team more prominently in operational planning. When they established defensive positions for overnight stops, Elena found herself assigned to increasingly important sectors rather than being relegated to secondary roles. As the convoy reached more secure territory 3 days later, Elena reflected on how a single moment of crisis had changed her entire dynamic with the unit. The shot that eliminated the enemy sniper had been technically challenging, but it was the psychological impact on her fellow soldiers that proved most significant. She had demonstrated under fire that gender was irrelevant when it came to military effectiveness. However, Elena also understood that one successful engagement didn't guarantee acceptance or equal treatment going forward. Military culture changed slowly, and there would always be those who viewed her success as an exception rather than proof of broader capabilities. The real test would come in how she continued to perform and whether the respect she had earned would translate into genuine equality of opportunity. The mission was far from over, and Elena knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The enemy forces in this region were well-trained and highly motivated, using sophisticated tactics that required equally sophisticated responses. Her success against the sniper had earned her a place at the table, but staying there would require continued excellence under increasingly difficult circumstances. As the convoy prepared for the final approach to their destination, Elena cleaned her rifle and prepared for whatever challenges the next phase of their mission might bring. She had proven herself capable of making the shot when lives depended on it, but, in her mind, this was just the beginning of a longer journey toward full acceptance and equal treatment in the military she had chosen to serve. The forward operating base bustled with activity as Elena's unit prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value enemy commander was meeting with local militia leaders in a compound approximately 15 kilometers from their position. The target had been responsible for coordinating attacks against civilian populations and was considered one of the most wanted enemy operatives in the region. Elena checked her equipment for the third time that morning, ensuring every piece of gear was properly secured and functional. The mission would require a 2-day infiltration through hostile territory, followed by a complex operation to either capture or eliminate the target. General Thompson had specifically requested her inclusion in the primary assault team, a recognition of her abilities that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. The change in the general's attitude toward Elena had been gradual but unmistakable. Following her success during the convoy engagement, he had begun seeking her input during tactical planning sessions. Her insights about enemy sniper tactics and terrain analysis had proven valuable in subsequent operations, earning her a reputation as someone whose opinions carried weight regardless of her gender. Morrison approached her position carrying a detailed map of the target area. "Vasquez, the general wants to go over the approach routes one more time. Your input on potential Overwatch positions could make the difference between success and disaster." Elena studied the map, noting the elevation changes and sight lines around the target compound. The enemy had chosen their location well, with natural barriers that limited approach options and numerous defensive positions that could slow down any assault force. However, Elena noticed several potential sniper positions that could provide overwatch for the assault team, while remaining concealed from the compound's defenders. There, she pointed to a ridge approximately 800 meters from the target. That position would give clear sight lines to the compound while remaining hidden behind this rock formation. A sniper team there could provide overwatch for the entire operation. Morrison nodded approvingly. That's exactly what the general was thinking. The question is whether we can get a team into that position without being detected. Elena traced the approach route with her finger, identifying terrain features that could provide concealment. It's doable, but it would require moving at night and using this creek bed to avoid the open ground. The team would need to be in position before dawn to avoid being spotted. Their planning session was interrupted by the arrival of General Thompson and his staff. Elena had noticed that the general's interactions with her had become increasingly professional and respectful, a far cry from his initial skepticism about her presence in the unit. He no longer questioned her assignments or second-guessed her tactical contributions. Vasquez, the general said as he approached the map table, I've been reviewing your analysis of the target area. Your identification of that Overwatch position could be crucial to mission success. How confident are you about getting a sniper team into that position undetected? Elena considered the question carefully before responding. Sir, it's challenging but feasible. The approach would require careful timing and good weather conditions, but a small team could reach that position without compromising the operation. General Thompson studied the map for several moments before making his decision. I'm assigning you to lead the sniper team for this operation. You'll have Morrison and 2 other shooters under your command. Your mission is to establish Overwatch and provide precision fire support for the assault team. The assignment represented a significant shift in Elena's role within the unit. Leading a sniper team was a position of considerable responsibility that required not just shooting skills, but tactical judgment and leadership ability. The general's confidence in her capabilities was evident in his willingness to give her such a critical mission. As the briefing continued, Elena found herself actively participating in the tactical planning process. Her suggestions about timing, positioning, and contingency plans were received with the same seriousness as those from the more experienced team leaders. The transformation from reluctantly tolerated observer to respected team member had been remarkable in its speed and completeness. The infiltration began at sunset, with Elena's sniper team separating from the main assault force to take their assigned approach route. Moving through enemy territory required constant vigilance and careful attention to noise discipline. Every step had to be calculated to avoid detection while making progress toward their objective. Elena led her team through the darkened landscape, using night vision equipment to navigate the treacherous terrain. The creek bed she had identified during planning proved to be an excellent concealment route, though the rocky bottom made silent movement challenging. Each team member had to trust in Elena's route selection and timing to reach their position safely. As they approached their target position, Elena called a halt to assess the situation. Through her night vision scope, she could see that the ridge was unoccupied but showed signs of recent enemy activity. Footprints and disturbed vegetation suggested that enemy scouts had used this position recently, which could complicate their mission if hostile forces returned. Elena made the decision to continue with the original plan while implementing additional security measures. She positioned Morrison to watch their back trail while the other 2 shooters prepared their firing positions. The team had to be ready to engage targets while also being prepared to defend themselves if discovered by enemy patrols. Dawn approached slowly as Elena's team settled into their Overwatch position. Through her rifle scope, she had an excellent view of the target compound 800 meters away. The enemy had constructed a series of defensive positions around the main building, with guards visible at regular intervals. Intelligence estimates suggested that approximately 20 enemy fighters were present, along with the high-value target they had come to capture or eliminate. The assault team's approach was scheduled to begin at first light, giving Elena's team just enough visibility to identify targets while maintaining the element of surprise. As the eastern sky began to brighten, Elena could see movement around the compound as guards changed shifts and daily activities began. All positions, this is Overwatch. Elena spoke quietly into her radio. I have eyes on the target, counting at least 15 enemy personnel visible, with unknown numbers inside the main structure. General Thompson's voice came back through the radio. Roger, Overwatch. Assault team is in position and ready to begin approach. Maintain observation and report any changes in enemy disposition. Elena continued her surveillance of the compound, noting the patterns of guard movement and identifying potential threats to the assault team. The enemy appeared to be following a routine security protocol, which would work in favor of the attacking force if they could maintain the element of surprise. As the assault team began their approach, Elena noticed increased activity around the compound. It appeared that someone inside had detected signs of the approaching threat, and guards were moving to more alert positions. The situation was developing faster than planned, and tactical decisions would need to be made quickly. All units, this is Overwatch. Enemy alertness level appears to be increasing. I count multiple guards moving to defensive positions. Recommend acceleration of timeline. General Thompson's response was immediate. Roger, Overwatch. Assault team, execute immediate assault. Overwatch, engage targets of opportunity, and provide suppressing fire as needed. The compound erupted in activity as the assault team made contact with the enemy defenders. Elena could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions as both sides engaged in intense firefight. Through her scope, she identified enemy fighters who posed the greatest threat to the assault team's advance. Elena's first shot took down an enemy machine gunner who had been raking the assault team's position with devastating fire. The range was challenging, but her bullet found its mark, eliminating a significant threat to the advancing soldiers. She immediately shifted to a new target, an enemy fighter who was attempting to flank the assault team's position. The battle for the compound intensified as more enemy fighters emerged from concealed positions. Elena and her team worked systematically to eliminate threats while the assault team fought their way toward the main building. The coordination between the sniper team and the ground forces demonstrated the tactical sophistication that Elena's unit had developed through months of training and combat experience. As the assault team breached the main building, Elena maintained Overwatch to prevent enemy reinforcements from interfering with the operation. Through her scope, she could see enemy fighters attempting to establish a counterattack from a secondary building. Her accurate shooting disrupted their efforts and allowed the assault team to complete their mission. Overwatch, this is assault team leader. Target is secure. We have the high-value individual in custody and are preparing for extraction. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction at the successful completion of their mission. The operation had required precise coordination between multiple teams, and her sniper team's contribution had been essential to its success. The capture of such a significant enemy leader would have major implications for the security situation in the region. As the extraction phase began, Elena's team provided security overwatch to ensure that the assault team could safely withdraw with their prisoner. The enemy forces in the area were likely to respond quickly to the loss of their leader, making speed essential for the success of the overall mission. The return journey to the forward operating base proceeded without major incident, though Elena's team maintained vigilant watch for enemy pursuit. The successful completion of such a complex operation represented a significant achievement for the unit and validated the tactical approaches they had developed through months of combat experience. Upon their return to base, General Thompson called Elena aside for a private conversation. The change in his demeanor toward her had been remarkable, reflecting a complete transformation in his assessment of her capabilities and value to the unit. Vasquez, the general began, I owe you an apology. When you first joined this unit, I let my preconceptions cloud my judgment about your abilities. Your performance over the past several weeks has been outstanding, and today's mission success was largely due to your leadership and marksmanship skills. Elena appreciated the general's honesty and courage in acknowledging his past mistakes. Sir, I understand that change is difficult, especially when it challenges long-held beliefs. What matters is that we work together to accomplish the mission and protect our fellow soldiers. General Thompson nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. The military is changing, and leaders like me need to adapt our thinking to match new realities. Your success hasn't just proven that women can serve effectively in combat roles. It's shown me that judging people based on anything other than their abilities and character is a disservice to everyone involved. The conversation represented a significant milestone in Elena's military career, but she understood that the broader challenge of changing military culture would require continued effort from many people. Her individual success was important, But systemic change would only come through the accumulated experiences of many women proving their capabilities in various roles and situations. In the weeks that followed, Elena found herself increasingly involved in training new recruits and sharing her combat experiences with other units. Her story had become part of the growing evidence that women could serve effectively in all military roles when given the opportunity and appropriate training. The general's transformation had been equally significant. He became an advocate for merit-based assignments and worked to eliminate gender bias in his unit's operations. His influence extended beyond Elena's immediate team, as other commanders began to reconsider their own assumptions about women in combat roles. Elena's journey from skeptically tolerated recruit to respected team leader represented more than just personal achievement. It demonstrated that military effectiveness was determined by skill, dedication, and character rather than gender. The shot that had eliminated the enemy sniper during the convoy engagement had been a turning point, but it was her consistent performance over time that had truly changed minds and opened doors. As Elena cleaned her rifle after another successful mission, she reflected on how far she had come since those early days of training under General Thompson's disapproving gaze. The military was still evolving in its approach to gender equality, but progress was being made one mission, one successful operation, one changed mind at a time. The war would continue, and Elena knew that greater challenges lay ahead. However, she also knew that she had earned her place as a respected member of an elite military unit. The general's belief in her abilities had been hard-won, but it represented a broader shift in military thinking that would benefit future generations of women seeking to serve their country in combat roles. Elena's story had become part of a larger narrative about the evolution of military culture and the recognition that effectiveness in combat was not determined by gender but by skill, training, and dedication to mission success. The shot that had proven the general wrong had been just the beginning of a transformation that extended far beyond any single individual or unit.